If you bend down and take a look, see if you can find the dirt. Can you see dirt? Yeah. How much of that dirt do you think evaporates every year? None. On the average farm, 20,000 pounds per acre. And that's 70% carbon.
Where'd all the good people go? I've been changing channels, I don't see them on the TV shows. Where'd all the good people go?
You're the man when it comes to organic agriculture, and very well respected.
A lot of my inquiry was philosophical, I might say. It was somewhere between my master's and PhD that I met folks from Canadian organic growers. In 2001, we had our first $1 million, and then we started the Organic Agriculture Centre of Canada. We did research in organic agriculture across Canada.
For those who don't know, what is organic agriculture?
Well, it's a system of agriculture that has a set of standards. Those standards are backed up by CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Mm-hmm. Usually if someone is certified, then they can sell their products for a premium.
And where does that premium come from? Why do people pay more for organic agriculture in stores?
The labor requirement is much higher on an organic farm than it is on a conventional farm. Organic food is higher in antioxidants, which is a good thing. Antioxidants are good for us. They're lower in cadmium, and cadmium often comes along with phosphorus fertilizer, and most definitely lower in pesticide residues.
And why did you want to make organic better?
I think I was becoming more concerned about pesticides and the impact of pesticides on people and on the ecosystem.
I started farming this way because I was worried about what I was eating and what was available. But that was a long time ago. Now, I think that we have lots of food and we know how to make healthy food, but it's time for us to recognize that the real challenge is how we grow our food is much more important.
In the end, food is about health. 2/3 of chronic diseases are associated with unhealthy eating. So in that case, food is then becoming the problem.
The things that we grow commercially are annual crops and take so much out of the land. Fertilizer is so cheap, farmers think it's expensive, but that's only compared to the cost, the selling price of the product. Fertilizer is so much cheaper than labor that they will put the amount of fertilizer on a field that matches the potential of growth of that plant in a perfect year. And we almost never have perfect growing conditions.
As we come into an era of more variability in the weather because of climate change, it will become increasingly important to build up soil organic matter. The cost of not doing that is that we expose ourselves to a lot more risk in the future. There's a tendency on conventional farms in Ontario right now to have a very simple rotation of just corn, 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 or corn, soy. And with those simple rotations, it's pretty clear that soil organic matter is going down. And soil organic matter is one of the best indicators of soil health. It positively correlates to every other indicator of soil health there is.
But when we don't need to degrade our land and when we are throwing away 30 or 40% of our food, it seems crazy that we still encourage farmers to increase production. I'm getting really depressing.
A huge shift that I'm seeing nowadays towards plant-based diets.
Yes.
Is that a much more sustainable future for us? How is that in perspective from an agricultural standpoint?
Well, I think so. Like it goes to what I was saying before on the whole feed versus food. I certainly think there's a role for livestock, but it's gone a little bit out of whack. And I think most people would agree that we eat too much meat. I can see that there are lots of reasons why meat is useful. I think it should be done within high animal welfare standards. But to emphasize livestock production so much that we take acres and acres and acres of land to produce dedicated crops that could be food crops for us to feed to livestock. Regardless of the efficiency, it'll never be one-to-one, and I don't think it's something that we're going to be able to carry in the future.
I breed for the characteristics that I want rather than run some particular breed. Like this guy looks like an Angus, but he's not. He's crossed. He got some. They all have some Angus in them, but I've crossed them with different breeds to get fat underneath the skin so that they like being outside, so that they don't have to breathe stale air in the wintertime in the barn. They have insulation. They have good coats. They give milk that isn't huge volume but has lots of butter fat, so the calves don't get diarrhea, called scours in cows. So characteristics like that is what I look for in a breed. Protecting the environment, creating that which sequesters the most carbon, puts the deepest roots down. That's what's most important. Because the deeper the roots, the more water can be absorbed in the spring. The more water that's absorbed in the spring, the less flooding there is. The more water that's absorbed in the spring, the more bioactive water there is for the growing season for the plants that can reach it. In the mainstream, we tile drain the farms to get grow corn that we don't need, and so all the water leaves in 2 weeks in the spring and heads out to the ocean before it's done any good in the environment. So we need to pay farmers for how they farm and get the results that we want, rather than paying them just for the food. We pay farmers to grow corn. We don't pay them to not pollute.
Right. So if we are not looking after the soil because someone might not be using cover crops, or they're not using crop rotation, or they're not using soil amendments, then there's a risk of soil organic matter going down. There's the risk of pests in soils building up, especially if you have monocrops year after year. There's more pest pressure, and then you have to use more pesticides to control that. In an organic system, farmers necessarily have to use crop rotations, and they have to introduce that diversity in order to control pests. If you manage the biodiversity, then we're not going to be as much of a problem, and the beneficial insects control others.
If we pay attention to the fundamentals, you can't produce bad food like this way. I can't use sprays because it kills the bacteria in the soil. I can't use chemicals because it changes the pH and kills the worms. So all the things that I want to do when I pay attention to building soil makes for all the things that is perfect. And guess what? I want to use cows to re-fertilize, so I don't have to use fertilizer. The fats that we get from cows on grass are very different than the fats we get from cows on carbohydrates.
Absolutely.
So in that regard, I guess it is quite clear that it's much healthier.
John, how do you switch farmers over to organic? There's like 4 years.
You do it this way. These people all say what they want. And guess what? It's all farmers do it. Like when I started, I had like 20 customers, and my wife supported us. And, I formed the co-op, and now there's a waiting list of farmers who want to be in the co-op. So as the demand grows, we can bring farmers on. That's part of it. Then as the demand grows, the public awareness grows. So that's the change that's going to come, not from farmers, me telling farmers this, because they don't want to do it and lose their farm. We need the demand for people. I ended up spending most of my life talking to people rather than farming.
There's a wide range of how people manage, and there are quite a few people who are not certified as organic farmers who are doing an excellent job. The problem is that it's difficult for every consumer to know their farmer personally and to have that personal relationship.
Do you think that it's possible to scale out organic farming and responsible agriculture and supply to the local population, or will it require more conventional industrial sized farm?
There are all sorts of issues there with labor. We have guidance systems now and weeders and so on, And back in the old days, somebody had to sit in a tractor and go like this and turn around and watch what was happening behind. And now they just set their GPS and they can get the weeder within an inch of the crop and get all the weeds in between. And they even have weeders now that go in between the plants within the row. So if we can get those systems to work, it may mean that somewhat less labor is required.
And I've always wanted to ask, and I always ask people that I look up to, in one sentence, what's the greatest life lesson that you've learned over the course of your life? Not at all.
That is a very significant question, and that's a question that I hear on TV all the time when people are interviewing.
I ask my dad, I ask my grandpa, because I do.
That shows great respect.
Yeah, I do respect their opinions.
For me, you have to be willing to. I had to be willing to accept that I'm not very smart, and that we will get to a good place when we have a lot of people who have the right intention, and when we make mistakes, can be willing to be humble enough to know that these are wrong and we have to back off and try again and be persistent and try again. I don't know whether that answers your question.
That's beautiful.
It's about the smartest people in the world don't save the world. What's going to make a difference is us as a group.
Where does it begin? Where do we start?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't know for sure. There's Douglas, and I can't remember his last name, at University of New Brunswick, has come out with a whole system of community-based social marketing, and he talks about how people change behavior. And I remember he gives the example of putting up big signs and telling everybody they should keep their tire pressure at a certain level, and it has almost no impact. But if you use the same amount of money to pay young people to be at service stations as people are pulling up, and to say, may I check your tire pressure? If you just increased it by this much, you would save this much gasoline, and it's not going to cost you anything. May I put more air in your tire? Almost everybody says yes, and it has a huge impact.
Alright, I'm ready now, I ain't gonna fall back now. Alright, I'm take it on me, baby. Alright, I ever ask, are you gonna